While you're spraying bug spray and hiding in tents, Native Americans slept peacefully outdoors for centuries, completely unbothered by mosquito swarms that would drive you insane within minutes. Sleep was never easy when tiny vampires ruled the night. Across North America, millions of mosquitoes swarmed through forests, swamps, and plains, turning peaceful evenings into buzzing nightmares. Native American tribes faced this challenge every single night for hundreds of years. These weren't just annoying little pests either. Mosquitoes could make life absolutely miserable. While we complain about a few bites during camping trips, imagine dealing with clouds of them every night without any modern protection. No bug spray, no screen tents, no air-conditioned bedrooms to escape to. Most tribes slept on open ground or in basic shelters that offered little protection from flying insects. Some had bark houses or hide teepees, but these weren't sealed fortresses. Air flowed freely through most traditional dwellings, which meant mosquitoes could follow right along. The bugs treated these shelters like an all-you-can-bite buffet. Then, European contact made everything worse. Ships brought new diseases like malaria and yellow fever, turning mosquito bites from annoying to potentially deadly. What had been a comfort problem suddenly became a survival issue. Bites that once just itched could now kill. But here's the thing about sleep disruption. It doesn't just make you grumpy the next day. Native Americans needed deep, restorative rest to handle incredibly demanding physical work, hunting massive buffalo, farming without modern tools, traveling hundreds of miles on foot, building entire villages by hand. Poor sleep meant poor performance, and poor performance could mean starvation. The mosquito problem wasn't uniform across the continent either. Tribes in the humid southeast faced different challenges than those in the dry southwest. Great Lakes communities dealt with swarms during wild rice season, while Gulf Coast groups battled year-round populations. Desert tribes had fewer mosquitoes, but concentrated breeding areas that created seasonal nightmares. Each environment demanded unique solutions. What worked for the Seminole and Florida swamps wouldn't help the Lakota on windy plains. Coastal tribes faced salt marsh mosquitoes, mountain peoples dealt with alpine varieties, and everyone had to adapt their methods accordingly. The weird part is that Native Americans couldn't just pack up and move to mosquito-free zones. Their entire way of life was tied to specific landscapes, sacred sites, seasonal food sources, trading routes, ancestral territories. They had to figure out how to coexist with these blood-sucking neighbors. Well, coexist might be too generous. Native Americans developed an entire arsenal of anti-mosquito warfare techniques that would make modern pest control companies jealous. The oldest weapon in this battle? Smoke that could turn any campsite into a mosquito-free sanctuary. When you can't build walls, you build clouds. Native American tribes discovered that mosquitoes absolutely hate thick, choking smoke, and they turned this weakness into their greatest nighttime weapon. The Ojibwe people became masters of what they called smudges. These weren't your typical campfires. They gathered damp leaves, wet grass, and green sticks, then set them smoldering for hours. The trick wasn't creating bright flames. It was producing the thickest, most persistent smoke possible. Think of it as nature's first bug zapper, except instead of electricity, it used good old-fashioned suffocation. But here's where it gets clever. These smudge fires weren't just random smoke machines. Tribes positioned them strategically around sleeping areas, creating invisible barriers that mosquitoes simply refused to cross. The smoke had to be thick enough to repel insects, but thin enough that people could still breathe. Getting that balance right, that took generations of practice. The Menominee tribe stumbled onto something brilliant during their wild rice harvests. They'd build massive drying fires to process their grain and noticed something incredible. Hardly any mosquito bites during those smoky summer nights. What started as food preparation became double-duty pest control. Smart, right? Then there's the plant selection. This wasn't just any random vegetation getting tossed into the fire. Experienced tribal members knew exactly which plants packed the most mosquito-repelling punch. Cedar bark produced oils that insects despised. Certain grasses released compounds that confused mosquito senses. Sweet-smelling sage didn't just smell good to humans, it smelled terrible to bugs. The weird part is how they kept these fires burning all night without constant attention. They'd layer damp materials in specific ways, creating slow-burning smolders that lasted 6 to 8 hours. No midnight fire maintenance required. The smoke would drift across sleeping areas like a protective blanket, keeping families bite-free until dawn. Some tribes even created portable smudge pots, small containers filled with smoldering materials that could be carried to new campsites. Instant mosquito protection wherever they traveled. These weren't fancy contraptions either. Hollowed gourds, clay bowls, even large shells worked perfectly. The morning routine was simple. Splash water on the coals, kick dirt over the ashes, and wake up refreshed instead of covered in itchy welts. No complicated cleanup, no expensive equipment, just smoke, time, and knowledge passed down through countless generations. But smoke wasn't the only armor these ingenious people developed against their buzzing enemies. Sometimes the most effective protection came from materials that were literally right under their feet, waiting to be discovered in the muddy banks of rivers and lakes. Smoke worked great, but what if you didn't have dry wood? What if the wind kept blowing your carefully built smudge fire in the wrong direction? Native Americans had backup plans. One of the most ingenious was literally right under their feet. Mud became living armor against mosquitoes. Think about it. These insects need to pierce your skin with their needle-like mouths. Cover that skin with a thick layer of dried mud, and suddenly their job gets a lot harder. It's like trying to bite through leather. Some tribes turned mud application into an art form. They'd scoop up clay-rich soil from riverbanks, mix it with water until it reached the perfect consistency, then smear it across exposed skin before bedtime. The process was surprisingly fast. A family could coat themselves in minutes. But here's where it gets clever. Mud wasn't just a physical barrier, it was also air conditioning. When water and the mud evaporated, it cooled the skin underneath. During sweltering summer nights, this double benefit made sleeping outdoors actually comfortable. You stayed cool and bite-free. The mud dried into a tough, flexible shell that moved with the body. Unlike modern bug spray that sweats off, this natural armor stayed put all night long. Mosquitoes would land, probe around with their little sensors, then give up and fly away, frustrated. Well, not all mud worked equally well. River clay was premium stuff because it contained minerals that made it stick better and last longer. Swamp mud worked too, though it sometimes smelled pretty rank. Beach tribes used sandy clay mixtures that dried faster but needed thicker application. Rinsing off became a morning ritual. People would wade into lakes or streams at sunrise, scrubbing away the night's protective coating. Kids probably loved this part, rolling in mud with parental permission, then splashing around in the water afterward. Makes sense, right? Then there's the practical genius of it all. Mud was everywhere, completely free, and required zero preparation time. No special plants to gather, no fires to maintain, no smoke to accidentally breathe. Just bend down, scoop, and apply. Some groups got really sophisticated with their mud recipes. They'd add plant fibers to make it stick better or mix in aromatic herbs for extra mosquito-repelling power. These weren't random experiments. They represented generations of trial and error, passed down through families. Of course, mud had its limitations. It was messy, made you look pretty wild, and didn't work well in cold weather. But when mosquitoes were at their worst and other methods failed, this earthy solution kept people sleeping peacefully through the night. But what about tribes in areas where good mud was scarce? Mud worked great, but what happens when you're nowhere near a riverbank? Native Americans along the Gulf Coast had another trick up their sleeves. Actually, they had it all over their skin. Animal fat became their go-to mosquito armor. Not just any fat, mind you. We're talking about rancid alligator grease, spoiled fish oils, and other delightfully smelly animal fats that would make a modern person gag. But here's the thing. Mosquitoes absolutely hated it. Early European explorers wrote about entire families slathered in this greasy coating from head to toe. One Spanish conquistador described Native American children as glistening like seals before bedtime. The adults would carefully rub the fat into every exposed patch of skin, creating a slippery barrier that mosquitoes couldn't penetrate. Why did this work so well? Turns out mosquitoes rely heavily on their sense of smell to find victims. They're attracted to the carbon dioxide we breathe out, plus specific scents from our skin. When you coat yourself in rancid animal fat, you're basically wearing an olfactory disguise. The mosquitoes can't detect your natural human smell through all that grease. The process wasn't exactly pleasant. Families would heat up chunks of old alligator fat or fish oil until it melted into a spreadable paste. Then everyone took turns coating each other, making sure to cover arms, legs, faces, and necks. The smell was reportedly so strong that European traders could detect Native American camps from miles away. But it worked. Modern scientists have actually tested rancid animal fats against mosquitoes, and the results are impressive. While it doesn't last as long as today's DEET-based repellents, it provides solid protection for several hours, perfect for getting through a night's sleep without constant buzzing and biting. Different tribes used whatever animals were available in their region. Coastal groups favored fish oils and seal fat. Inland tribes might use bear grease or rendered fat from deer. The key was letting it go rancid. Fresh fat didn't work nearly as well. Something about the breakdown of oils created compounds that mosquitoes found particularly offensive. Morning cleanup involved scraping off the hardened fat and washing in nearby water sources. This became such a routine that children learned to apply their own protective coating by age 5 or 6. The weird part is how effective this ancient method really was. While we might wrinkle our noses at the thought, these communities managed to sleep peacefully through swarms that would send modern campers running for their cars. Speaking of running, there were other creatures in the night that Native Americans learned to welcome rather than fear. While mud shields and smoke screens provided solid protection, Native Americans understood something modern pest control often misses. Nature fights itself. Instead of battling every mosquito individually, many tribes recruited an army of natural predators to handle the dirty work for them. Dragonflies earned the nickname mosquito hawks for good reason. These aerial acrobats can devour hundreds of mosquitoes daily, and Native Americans noticed this connection early. Some tribes deliberately planted flowering plants near their camps to attract more dragonflies. Sweet-smelling blooms drew the dragonflies, which then patrolled the area like tiny fighter jets. Makes sense, right? Let the professionals handle what they do best. But dragonflies weren't working alone in this ecosystem. Bats emerged at dusk, precisely when mosquitoes became most active. A single bat can consume over 1,000 mosquitoes per hour. Native Americans recognized this timing wasn't coincidence, it was natural scheduling. They avoided disturbing bat roosts near their sleeping areas, understanding these winged mammals provided better nighttime security than any human could manage. Birds joined the anti-mosquito coalition too. Purple martins, swallows, and other insect-eating species received protection from many tribes. Disturbing these birds meant losing valuable allies in the war against biting insects. The weird part is how perfectly this timing worked out. Birds handled daytime mosquito patrol while bats took the night shift. Then there's the bigger picture that really shows Native American ecological wisdom. Many tribes actively manage wetlands, not just for fishing or plant gathering, but to maintain the delicate balance that kept mosquito populations under control. They understood that draining all standing water would eliminate mosquito breeding grounds, but it would also destroy the habitats where dragonfly larvae developed and where birds found food. This balance required serious environmental knowledge passed down through generations. Elders taught younger tribe members which ponds to preserve, which areas attracted the most beneficial predators, and how human activities could accidentally tip the scales toward more mosquitoes. They learned that healthy ecosystems with diverse predator populations naturally regulated pest insects without human intervention. Let's not forget the practical genius here. While European settlers often tried to control mosquitoes through brute force, draining everything, killing anything that moved, Native Americans worked with existing natural systems. They enhanced what already functioned rather than replacing it entirely. This approach meant fewer mosquitoes around sleeping areas without the constant maintenance required by smoke fires or daily mud applications. The ecosystem did most of the heavy lifting automatically. But even with nature's pest control army working overtime, Native Americans didn't rely entirely on animal allies for protection. Mud and animal fat only went so far. Native Americans knew something modern people are just rediscovering. Plants pack serious mosquito fighting power. These weren't random weeds either. Tribes spent generations testing which plants actually worked and which ones were just pretty to look at. Sweetgrass became the MVP of nighttime protection across many regions. When burned slowly near sleeping areas, its sweet smoke created an invisible barrier that mosquitoes absolutely hated. The Lakota would braid long sweetgrass strips, then light one end like natural incense. One braid could smolder for hours, releasing just enough aromatic smoke to keep biters away without choking anyone. Sage worked differently, but just as effectively. Dried sage bundles were rubbed directly on skin, leaving behind oils that made people smell terrible to mosquitoes, but pleasant to humans. The weird part is that sage actually confuses mosquito antennae, scrambling their ability to locate warm-blooded targets. Pretty clever for a plant, right? Then there's cedar, which tribes used in multiple ways. Cedar boughs were woven into temporary bed frames, creating mattresses that naturally repelled insects. Some groups would strip cedar bark and weave it into blankets or sleeping mats. The oils in cedar don't just smell good, they contain compounds that mosquitoes find genuinely offensive. But here's where it gets really interesting. Different regions developed completely different plant arsenals based on what grew locally. Plains tribes relied heavily on prairie sage and buffalo grass. Forest dwellers used pine needles, birch bark, and wild mint. Coastal groups discovered that certain beach grasses and salt marsh plants worked wonders when dried and burned. The Ojibwe created complex herbal washes by boiling multiple plants together. They'd steep wild bergamot, yarrow, and cattail roots into concentrated teas, then splash the cooled liquid on their skin before bed. These plant cocktails didn't just repel mosquitoes, they often soothed existing bites and prevented infection. Let's not forget that many tribes made their actual beds from insect-repelling plants. Instead of just lying on bare ground, they'd create thick mats from aromatic grasses, fern fronds, or pine boughs. Sleeping directly on these natural repellents meant all-night protection without having to maintain fires or reapply anything. The most sophisticated groups developed seasonal plant calendars, knowing exactly when different species were most potent. Spring plants had different chemical profiles than fall harvests. This wasn't guesswork, it was botanical science passed down through countless generations of trial and error. What's amazing is that modern research keeps proving these traditional plant choices were scientifically sound. The essential oils these tribes relied on actually do disrupt mosquito behavior in measurable ways. Of course, plants alone couldn't solve every mosquito problem. Sometimes you needed to get more creative with your entire sleeping setup. When mosquitoes ruled the night, Native Americans discovered that what you wore and where you slept mattered just as much as what you burned or smeared on your skin. Their clothing choices weren't about fashion, they were about survival. Long sleeves, pants, and wraparound blankets became nighttime armor against buzzing attackers. Thick leather or tightly woven fabric blocked mosquito proboscis from reaching skin. Some tribes even pulled their clothing tight around wrists and ankles, creating sealed barriers that frustrated hungry insects. Smart? Absolutely. Comfortable in summer heat? Not exactly, but better than being eaten alive. Then there's the genius of strategic shelter placement. Native Americans positioned their sleeping areas to catch evening breezes that scattered mosquito swarms. Wind became their invisible ally. A simple lean-to or windbreak angled just right could redirect airflow and make mosquitoes work much harder to reach sleeping people. These weren't fancy structures, just smart positioning that used nature's own ventilation system. Elevation offered another escape route. Raised sleeping platforms, even just a few feet off the ground, moved people above the densest mosquito zones. Ground-level air stays thick with insects, especially near water sources. But climb higher? The mosquito population thins out dramatically. Some groups built simple raised beds from logs and branches, creating mosquito-free sleeping islands. The weird part is how they read their environment like a mosquito forecast. Experienced tribe members could predict bad mosquito nights by checking humidity, wind patterns, and even the behavior of other animals. They knew which spots near camp would be crawling with insects and which areas stayed relatively clear. This wasn't guesswork, it was generations of careful observation turned into practical wisdom. Sleep timing became another weapon in their arsenal. Peak mosquito activity happens during specific hours, usually right after sunset and before dawn. Some tribes adjusted their sleep schedules accordingly, staying up later when mosquitoes were most active, then sleeping deeper during quieter hours. Others rose extremely early, before the morning mosquito rush began. Community sleeping arrangements multiplied protection efforts. Groups could maintain larger smudge fires, share clothing strategies, and watch for mosquito danger spots together. Collective wisdom meant better rest for everyone. One person might spot a mosquito breeding area that others missed, and the whole group benefited from that knowledge. These techniques kept entire civilizations rested and productive for so many years. That's not just survival, that's wisdom we've mostly forgotten in our modern world.